You type the message, you read it once, then again. You change one word, delete a sentence, add an emoji, remove the emoji. Suddenly, the message that took 15 seconds to write has now become this tiny psychological battlefield inside your head. And eventually, you just delete the whole thing. Maybe you tell yourself you'll send it later. Maybe you decide it wasn't important anyway. But the strange part is how emotionally real it felt for something so small. Like the risk wasn't sending a text, the risk was being seen incorrectly. So why do some people do this constantly while others can send messages without thinking twice about it? Why does hitting send feel so psychologically loaded for certain people? Because once you understand what is actually happening underneath this behavior, you realize it was never about texting at all. Psychologist Mark Leary spent years studying something called social evaluative threat, which sounds academic and complicated, but really just means the fear of being judged by other people. And your brain treats this as a much bigger deal than you consciously realize. Because human beings evolved in social groups where rejection was not emotionally uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Your nervous system still carries traces of that wiring. So when someone stares at a message wondering if it sounds stupid or annoying or too much or too emotional, what they're really trying to avoid is social exposure. The possibility of misunderstanding, the possibility of regret, the possibility that someone will read what they said and form an opinion they can't control. And what's interesting is that most of these people are not bad communicators at all. Usually it's the opposite. They're hyper-aware communicators. They notice tone shifts instantly. They replay conversations after they happen. They can detect subtle emotional changes in someone's response time or wording that most people completely miss, which means every message carries layers for them. They're not just sending words. They're trying to predict reactions. They're trying to control interpretation. They're trying to avoid emotional friction before it happens. There's another concept here from psychology called rejection sensitivity. Researchers found that some people begin anticipating rejection so automatically that their brain starts treating neutral situations like emotionally risky ones. A short reply feels cold. A delayed response feels personal. A period at the end of a sentence suddenly feels loaded with meaning. And once your nervous system starts scanning for social danger like that, texting becomes exhausting. Because texting removes the one thing anxious brains desperately rely on: immediate feedback. You cannot see their face. You cannot hear their tone. You send the message into silence and wait for your brain to invent what happens next. So, some people try to solve this by perfecting the message before it leaves their hands. But perfection is a moving target. The more emotionally important the conversation is, the more impossible the message becomes to send. That's why people who delete messages often do it most with people they care about, not strangers. The stakes feel higher. A random person misunderstanding you is uncomfortable. Someone you deeply care about misunderstanding you feels almost existential. Think about what happens internally the moment someone types something honest. I miss you. That hurt me. I don't think I'm okay. For 1 second, the truth exists outside their head, and then immediately another part of the brain steps in and says, delete that. Not because the feeling wasn't real, but because vulnerability without guaranteed safety feels dangerous to some nervous systems. And this usually did not appear out of nowhere. Somewhere earlier in life, many of these people learned that expressing themselves carried consequences. Maybe they were misunderstood often. Maybe they were mocked for being emotional. Maybe opening up created conflict instead of connection. Or maybe they grew up around emotionally unpredictable people, where saying the wrong thing could suddenly shift the entire mood of the room. So they adapted. They learned to rehearse, to calculate, to edit themselves before anyone else could. And over time, this creates a very strange relationship with communication. They become incredibly articulate inside their own head. Entire conversations happen internally with clarity and emotional depth. But translating those thoughts into the outside world feels strangely unsafe. So messages pile up in drafts, feelings stay half expressed. Conversations happen too late or not at all. But here's the part people rarely talk about. Deleting messages is not always insecurity. Sometimes it's emotional survival disguised as caution, because some people became so used to managing other people's reactions that they lost contact with what they actually wanted to say. Their first instinct is not self-expression, it's self-protection. The tell is how physically tense they become before sending something honest. Their heart speeds up, they reread the message obsessively. They imagine every possible interpretation. Sometimes they even send the message and immediately regret it, not because it was wrong, but because being emotionally visible feels unbearable once it's irreversible. But then there's another type of person who deletes messages, and this one's a little different. These are the people who think deeply before they speak because words genuinely matter to them. They understand that language changes relationships. One sentence can soften someone or harden them. One badly timed response can echo for years. So they approach communication carefully, not out of fear, but out of awareness. They know that once something leaves your mouth or your screen, you cannot fully control what it becomes inside someone else's mind. These people often become excellent listeners, excellent writers, sometimes even excellent psychologists without realizing it, because they spend so much time observing emotional nuance that they begin understanding people at a very deep level. The downside is that they can become trapped in endless self-editing, always refining, always adjusting, trying to find the perfect sentence that carries zero risk. But no human interaction works like that. Real connection requires a certain tolerance for being misunderstood occasionally. You might be watching this realizing you do this constantly. You type paragraphs and erase them. You overthink replies. You leave messages unsent for hours or even days. And if that's you, I want you to notice something important. Your mind is not weak. It's highly adaptive. It learned to protect you socially. The problem is that eventually protection can become overprotection. And then the thing that once kept you emotionally safe starts quietly isolating you. Because the truth is, some of the most important moments in human relationships begin with messages that almost didn't get sent. The apology, the confession, the boundary. The honest answer, the I miss you, the I need help. Most deep connections are built from moments where somebody tolerated vulnerability long enough to press send anyway. And strangely, confidence in communication usually doesn't come from saying the perfect thing. It comes from surviving the imperfect thing, realizing the world did not collapse because you expressed yourself honestly. That's how your nervous system slowly relearns safety. Not through avoidance, through experience.